Welcome to the Matt Waller Podcast, sponsored by New Road Capital Partners, where we look at success at the intersection of technology, logistics, supply chain, retail, and CPG, which we also call the retail value chain. I want to clarify that this podcast is distinct from my responsibilities as a professor in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Nonetheless, it aligns with my aspiration to provide practical insights to professionals in business by showcasing companies and people that can enhance your ability to manage, lead, strategize, and market effectively in the retail value chain. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I'd like to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to our founding sponsor, New Road Capital Partners. New Road Capital Partners invests in proven and innovative technologies, products, and services that serve existing and unmet needs in the marketplace. New Road partners with growth-oriented companies in supply chain and logistics and innovative consumer companies. As experienced entrepreneurs and operators, the New Road team prides itself on the high level of collaboration it brings to each of its investments. New Road's team of investment professionals and operating partners have deep, relevant investing and operating experience, including significant experience leading large divisions of enterprise companies and building businesses from scale to concept to realization. To learn more, visit newroadcp.com. I also want to disclose that I'm an advisor to New Road. I would like to take this moment to recognize podcastvideos.com for being our provider of podcasts. Their mission is simple: to streamline the process of creating podcast videos. They're equipped with industry-leading equipment and streamlined processes, and their studio and services save you time, money, and hassle. I'm very pleased with the services they provide me. Now, without further ado, let's get started with today's episode. I'm really excited about today's podcast recording. I'm interviewing Michele Meyer, who has over 30 years of experience at General Mills in true leadership positions with global brands. And she was a very successful leader. The numbers show that. But as you listen to the recording, you'll hear her talk about what made her successful. And you'll see that she is certainly a humble person. She's focused on learning, and she values teamwork, which I think are all extremely important in business. The other thing that's interesting is, Michele has experience when she was at General Mills acquiring companies, and she really valued the founders and their perspectives, and she brought that into General Mills as a whole, not just allowing the founders to continue that. And you'll hear about how that impacts marketing and leadership as well. The other thing, we talked a little bit about organic, natural food, et cetera, these niche areas that are growing like crazy. We talked about it from the perspective of farming, from the perspective of marketing like pricing, also psychographics and demographics. So I think you'll enjoy learning about that. And of course, now Michele's working in private equity. And so all these things she learned really are paying off in a different way, where she's on the side of the investor, but she's an operating partner. So she's actually helping these companies grow and scale and succeed in the marketplace. So it is a really interesting conversation. I'll tell you a little bit more about her. She was SVP and president of the Snacks Operating Unit of General Mills, and she managed a portfolio of brands that were worth over $2 billion, including Nature Valley, Fiber One, Larabar, Chex Mix, etc. She led the division to achieve mid-single-digit top and bottom line growth by growing market share in the bars, nutrition bars, and fruit snacks category. Michele's key responsibilities included P&L ownership, advertising, product development, strategic planning, and holistic margin management. Prior to her role in the Snacks Operating Unit, she served as SVP and president of the meals operating unit, where she was responsible for $3 billion in sales from brands such as Progresso, Green Giant, Old El Paso, and Betty Crocker potatoes. So she has had a huge impact on really food and grocery in general. You're familiar with all the brands she led. And Michelle's experience in the natural and organic space is evidenced by her role as VP and President of Small Food Planets, General Mills' Natural and Organic Operating Unit. Under her leadership, the division grew from $100 million to over $300 million in sales, and she was instrumental in the acquisition of both Larabar and Food Should Taste Good brands. In addition to her experience at General Mills, she's held various board positions, including non-executive director at GNC, Quinn, Kevin's Natural Foods, and Embark Trucks. Currently, she serves as operating partner at New Road Capital Partners, and I have met with her and worked with her in a setting where I've actually observed her contributing to a team, valuing the team. I really think you will learn a lot from this podcast, so thank you for joining us. Well, thank you so much, Michele, for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, Matt.
Michele, you had an incredibly successful 30-year-plus career at General Mills. It really culminated in leadership in major operating units like Snacks and Small Planet Foods. What did you learn during your time at General Mills that's contributed most to your success as an executive?
Gosh, Matt, there's a number of things, so maybe I'll give you a couple of thoughts on that one. The first one that jumps out to me is really just to trust the process. I think sometimes we have a plan that we think we need to follow, and we need to go from job A or division A to division B and make sure that we accomplish all of these things, and there's a timeline, and there's a master plan. And in hindsight, what I would say is there's windows of learning, there's windows of opportunity, there's mentors along the road, and to trust the process and to trust how you move through the process. I guess I would say that's probably one of the biggest ones for me. A second one, I would say that it probably took me into halfway through my career at General Mills really to bring to life, is to find out what you are really good at and to excel in those areas. So we all have strengths and we all have areas that are maybe not our strengths. I don't know if I'd call them weaknesses, right? Everybody's sort of got their highs and their lows in terms of what makes you tick. And so what worked really well for me is to find what you're great at. What are your gifts? We're all gifted in some way. Excel at those. Do whatever you can to make those better and bring the gifts that you bring to work or to whatever situation you're in. And then to get your areas that are not as strong into what I would call an acceptable range, right? Work on them where you need to, but you don't need to be excellent at everything. You need to be excellent in the areas that you're gifted. And when you find that right balance and then you trust your team for all the other areas that maybe you're not as strong at, the team overall becomes incredible and becomes better than what you could be on your own, and becomes certainly better than what you could be if you try and be good at everything. And so I think that for me, learning what are my gifts, what are the areas to excel in, and focusing on those and bringing them to the table every day at General Mills was really important for me in terms of learning, and then really allowed me to operate at my highest level. So maybe those buckets.
Wow, I really think that's so true. Having been around thousands and thousands of students over the past 30 years and seeing their careers evolve, it's really true. Because you're right, we have different gifts, and we're designed a little differently from others, and yet we can really utilize those to excel. But it seems that the world's created so that we're supposed to work as teams in a group.
Absolutely.
And so on the one hand, to identify your gifts, you need to be self-aware to a large degree. You also need to be grateful. Okay, I have these are my gifts. I'm going to excel in them. And to operate in a team, you've got to be humble a little bit to recognize, I'm not good at everything.
Yep, absolutely.
And I heard a study recently. I think it was on Andrew Huberman's podcast, but I'm not certain about that. But this fellow had studied happiness, and the people who are the most satisfied with life and happiest tend to be those that are humble and have agency, meaning they think they can do certain things. And I think that when you're comfortable with your gifts, you can be more confident to some degree.
Absolutely, because you can also trust that where I'm not going to catch that, or I'm not as, and for me personally, right, I love the big picture, I love innovation, I love driving results. I am not as great at catching all the little details, right? And if I am worried about that in the back of my mind, that's going to set me off and maybe not let me do the best that I can. But if I know I have a division chief financial officer, or I know I've got the right team around me who is doing the areas and excelling at the areas that I know it would take me a lot more time, then we're way better off. It allows me to play the game that I've been given to the best of my ability, for sure.
I remember the first meeting you and I were in together. Of course, we had dinner before the meeting, but the first meeting we were in where we were actually talking about business, and we were specifically talking about consumer businesses. And I listened to your conversation and what you were saying, very insightful. But I also noticed you were really good at being a part of the team. And I try to observe that about new people. You know, how do they behave in a group? I would think that also gave you a big advantage.
Absolutely. There's a lot to look back on, right? When you've been somewhere for 31 years and you've been with the same, obviously in different assignments or different divisions or what it might be, but a lot of the same people and certainly the same leadership. And when you think about it that way, it gives you time to reflect, because you start off the first at least half or third of your career and say, I've got to prove to everybody that I'm the best. And so I'm going to, whatever it might be, I'm going to talk the loudest, or I'm going to make sure I say the most things, or I want to make sure that I appear to come off the smartest, whatever that might be, right? Those are sort of those early false starts.
Yes.
And then as you get more comfortable with the job that you're in and who you are, what was the biggest gift to me at General Mills was to be surrounded by incredible, I would say, cross-functional teams and leaders and people. So if I knew that everybody in the room was really, really capable and excelled at their jobs, I could trust them. And so you want to read the room. You want to, is that something, with eye contact or whatever it might be, is that something you can do? Or what also took me a long time was to recognize, to be able to say that I am wrong, right? In a meeting, and to be able to pivot, right? Because everybody comes in with what you maybe believe is the right decision. And yet as you hear more people talk, if you can be open and adjust on the fly and comment as someone else is making a different point and say, I hadn't thought about it that way, or if those are the new criteria, then definitely that is a better outcome and a better alternative. And certainly to do it, I think overall makes us better leaders, but to do it in front of your team and to have folks recognize that I might come in with a point of view, but I am absolutely open to others and to input, that makes us all better. That opens the trust and improves the team dynamics and gets you to a better leadership place. So those probably were the big sort of life lessons halfway through and sort of towards the end of my career that I feel like just made me a better leader and a better business person overall.
You mentioned that doing that opens up trust, and I think you're right. Because people, if you're willing to say, okay, I'm wrong about that, or someone else says something that's brilliant, and you say, that's brilliant.
That's brilliant. I hadn't even thought about that. Exactly. Right, exactly.
It does increase your trust. I think for people reporting to you, it makes them feel a lot more
right. They're going to be heard. Yes,
and they're more likely to challenge you and to say really what they think, whether it's right or wrong is totally irrelevant. But it's so fun and satisfying to be in a group of people like that, isn't it?
It really, really is. And to me, that becomes really critical, that as you choose whatever job, whether it's, your first job or midway through your career, or for me, chapter 2, whatever you want to call it, that you're picking people that you want to be around, right? So everybody has a choice in what you do. And so what I've always said is if I can see that company or those people have a North Star, right? And they have a value system, And for sure, if they have a company culture and they've identified sort of, these are the key 5 buckets that we want to focus on in our culture, that's all helpful. But the individuals, truly individually, do they seem to be guided by a value system? Do they have a North Star? And if they do, and it aligns with my North Star, then the rest works together for the best, right? And that's how I think about it, right? You can bring your talents anywhere, and you can thrive in certain environments. And so to me, I guess, I don't know, that's maybe another life lesson over 30 years of working. Be where you want to be and be where you fit in most, and you'll do the best there.
Well, I remember when the first time you and I met, I was fortunate enough to sit by you at dinner.
Sure.
That happened by happenstance.
Right, definitely.
But I remember before the dinner, I looked at everyone's backgrounds and I thought, I wonder how she got connected to New Road. And I wondered if you really had similar values. Just not that you're a bad person.
Sure, of course. Right.
But as I sat next to you within 10 minutes, I knew it was easy. I could actually, even when we talked for the first few seconds, I sensed that you were aligned from a values perspective.
Right.
Would you talk, and you said that was a key variable.
Completely critical.
You could have worked with any VC or any private equity firm you would have wanted to, but you chose New Road.
Right, exactly. It was really, well, honestly, when I retired from General Mills, I had no intent, and I think I told you this, besides, hey, I wasn't a stay-home mom, and I really wanted that as a part of my arsenal. And that was really important to me from just a value system. And then we went through COVID, and I happened to be home, and I'm like, our boys were still in high school, and that was fantastic for me personally and for our family, and I loved it. I really hadn't thought that I wanted to do much of a chapter 2, and I had happened into a board or two just from my General Mills days, and so that was great, and it was interesting. And then as the boys got older and one went off to college and you had a little bit more time, this concept of maybe pursuing a chapter 2, and maybe, part of it is you want to continue to learn and you want to continue to be challenged, but you also know that you've been blessed with a great career and that you can give back. Right, and there's people you can mentor, and there's situations, whether they're founders in companies or business situations that you've seen, right, 100 times. And so can I help here, regardless of what the compensation is? And so I hadn't really thought about doing a chapter 2, but as I got a few years into retirement, that seemed to make sense and opportunities were out there. And there were definitely some, whether they're in any industry, private equity, VC, other industries, and you know within 5 or 10 minutes of talking to even a headhunter on the phone, if this is something that's going to jive for you, and could you do it for a month as a consultant versus could you actually join a team and be a part of that team and say, what, if I'm on your website, then I want to make sure we are similar in our thinking and how we pursue opportunities and what we say no to, frankly, right? Sometimes what we say no to is just as important, if not more so, than what we say yes to. And will I be on a team or with a group that, gets us into a company that I don't believe in, or I don't think has the right prospects, or has a different sort of grounding than what I might think is the right one. And so for New Road and joining New Road as an operating partner, it was critically important for me to not just sort of go through the interview process or have a few meetings because, right, they're smart people and there's a lot of smart people, but just to really say, I could be around you guys and gals. I could be a part of this team. I think I could learn. These other operating partners are similar to me, right, in terms of background. And I feel like sometimes, you mentioned like, gosh, I look at your resume or your background and I'm not sure exactly what your value system is. And that's because 30 years in big corporate America can really make you a certain type of individual. And that was painfully clear to me right after 31 years. Like, I loved what I did. I was super blessed. I was so fortunate. I can't even believe what I was allowed to do. And yet year after year, after 30 years, you're like, wow, I think there's different decisions that I want to make. And this is a good window to take that break and be a stay-home mom and do those kinds of things that I didn't ever have the opportunity to do. And so it was awesome. But you're exactly right. Sort of where you want to spend your time is a choice, whether it's early in your career, in the middle of your career, your chapter 2, whatever that might be, right? Where you want to spend your retirement years, where you want to live, all of those things come together. And those were really important. And understanding who New Road was and how they made decisions and who they put on their team was really important to me to align with. for sure.
Well, and everyone listening heard your bio before we started talking, and you've had huge amounts of responsibility. But one thing that may not have come through as clearly is you've actually brought about huge transformation and growth. You led a significant growth and transformation of Small Planet Foods, taking them from $100 million to $300 million in sales in a short period of time. And what would you, I want to ask a little bit more about this category, but what was your strategy, and what do you see as the keys to success in that space in general?
Oh, for sure. So when I was at General Mills and I had just been promoted to run the Small Planet Foods operating unit, that was very early in the natural and organic days, where Kellogg, I think, had just bought Bare Naked, and General Mills was probably the second large CPG manufacturer that was going to move into the space. And so we purchased directly from the founder, from Gene Kahn. We purchased, it was called Small Planet Foods, and it was literally made up of two brands, Cascadian Farm and Muir Glen. And they had a number of different products sort of within each of those lines. None of them overlapped with categories that General Mills was in. We didn't really know anything about this customer base, the consumers that were here, but we just knew that while natural and organic as an industry is growing mid 20% year on year, clearly consumers are moving here. There's an unmet need with our portfolio of brands. And so it was clearly something we all agreed we wanted to be a part of. I was asked to lead it. Working, I would say maybe there's a couple of things. Working with the founder and trusting the founder, believing in the founder, and keeping the founder still a part of whatever you're trying to do, I would say was probably the most important thing. So Gene Kahn ended up sort of doing transition with me, but he became the vice president of sustainability for overall General Mills, so well beyond Small Planet Foods, because we knew that there was something we were missing that we just weren't seeing as an overall company. So we had Gene Kahn stay on, understanding that you aren't the expert. So we might have, and I certainly probably thought, we were the experts in food, and we knew what to do in mainstream food. But that was really, really different when you had consumers that had a dramatically different belief system than maybe our consumers that had on, Progresso soup in a can or Old El Paso or those sorts of brands. It was very, very different. And the role of certain ingredients, or we would call it counting commas. So if you looked at that ingredient list, how many commas are there? I mean, are we talking about 45 ingredients on Totino's pizza, which is great. That is a great product and serves a great need, but it is not for everyone. And so what are the value systems of those consumers? And recognizing that you have no sixth sense here, right? So you had definitely you knew what to do with new consumers in mainstream marketing and products, but we didn't know what to do with new consumers in natural and organic. And the customer base operated very, very differently. So going into a meeting at Sprouts or at Whole Foods was dramatically different than going into a meeting at Kroger or H-E-B or Sam's Club or whatever it might have been, and recognizing that we needed to start all over and we needed to learn. So role of the founder, being super humble and understanding that you don't know what you need to do and you really need to listen and to learn. And then probably the third, I would say, really important piece was, oftentimes you make an acquisition, any company makes an acquisition, and you think you're coming in as like the great white stallion and we're here to rescue the company and make it better. And there were certainly things that General Mills could do. We had supply chain expertise and we had purchasing power, and there were a lot of things that we could bring to Small Planet Foods or to any acquisition in a different space that was much smaller, and we could help them with their margins and with their team and the quality of folks. But what we learned quickly was the opposite, right? What can this brand, what can Small Planet Foods, or our first acquisition of Larabar, which was $20 million at the time, or our second acquisition of Food Should Taste Good, what we learn from this team bring to the rest of General Mills? Which I know is maybe sort of an odd thought, but what can a $100 million business bring to at the time General Mills was probably $8 billion overall in sales. What can that team or that brand teach the rest of General Mills? And it just so happened that as we bought Larabar a couple years into Small Planet Foods, it was quite clear that there was a different type of marketing revolution going on. So it was the entree very, very early into social and the role of digital ads and the role of relationship marketing and the role of not like sampling a product in a cereal box that you might have been used to 20 years ago, but literally samples at a cross-country event or at a triathlon. And my brand aligns with these values, and we want to be with those people. And the creation of this term, brand ambassadors. So I'm trained on Larabar, and that is my full-time job, is to speak the gospel of Larabar and to tell folks what's in it and what's not in it and why it can help you with health. Like that was full. We had a team of people. And the concept that General Mills, that spent hundreds of millions of dollars in big marketing on TV and print and FSIs, and we did big mass marketing, could learn something from the more tactical, regional, relational approach of a company that was $20 million in sales was significant. And I would say for General Mills, that was the beginning of our transformation to more complex marketing, more intimate marketing, different. And the industry was moving that way as well, but it was our like very obvious example that we can learn just as much from a company like Small Planet Foods, Cascadian Farm Glen, or Larabar, or Food Should Taste Good, as they could learn from us. And just having that revelation and recognizing that there's value in both sides and you're both bringing something to the table was critically important for both of our journeys, for sure.
You know, I think that's not a common view from many and large companies that are very successful, because it's easy to go in and say, well, this company is small, they don't know what they're doing.
For sure, that's kind of what we thought. I mean, not exactly. We knew they had something, but we didn't think that there was going to be a golden nugget for General Mills on the other side of learning from them, and we found otherwise, for sure.
Well, you know, and you were mentioning the value systems. Those companies represent a value system. Their customers have a value system but it's all driven by the shopper or consumer's value systems that has affected all of this, which affects the psychographics and how the marketing is conducted, as you mentioned earlier. And I can see how that would be so helpful to a big company acquiring a smaller company. Just learning the psychographics of that market. You can even take existing products and probably differentiate new products to appeal to those psychographics a bit.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, there were follow-on learnings as well. When you sort of look at the workforce, and I don't want to pick on millennials because I'm sort of the other end of the boomer millennial in between, but Gen Z and all of the new employees that are coming in, they have different expectations of a company culture, or how they want to spend their time and how they want to spend their day and who they want to work for. And bringing in some of these very values-based but employee-based and values-based companies and seeing how they work together, and that this is why new generations are literally saying, I'm going to make a choice to do something that feels a little more entrepreneurial or fits my value system. Why are they making that choice? And if we still wanted to be competitive in the future at General Mills, how do we want to create or need to create that sense of team, even within today General Mills is a $12 billion company. How do you make it feel like you're a $20 million company on your team, on your brand team, or within your operating unit, or within the U.S. versus international? But you've got to create a sense of belonging for people. And it was really interesting just to see how sort of culturally values have changed and what employees wanted to come to work for, and how we could learn those types of things from a small company that had mastered it, and how do you want to replicate that at a big company? So lots of learnings there for us, for sure.
Well, you know, I looked up some data on the internet, and I don't know, I've tried to validate it. Some of it seems contradictory, but, you know, it's estimating the size of the health food market in the United States to be over $200 billion, which is bigger than I expected. It also, I saw estimates that organic was about $50 billion. I wasn't sure. I thought so health foods, over $200 billion. This is about 50. I know they're different.
Yeah, for sure.
And then plant-based food sales was about $5 billion or $5 to $10 billion. I saw different estimates. And that includes things like meat substitutes, dairy-free milk, et cetera. That's clearly grown dramatically. And then I started wondering, well, are there farmers that can supply this sort of thing? I mean, it seems to me, we've seen farming consolidate.
Definitely.
And yet the demand for this other type of food is growing so dramatically. You sometimes wonder, how do these meet?
Right.
Did you ever have that problem?
We absolutely have had those conversations at General Mills over the years, right? And maybe just to back up and to give maybe a little bit of texture to sort of understand the numbers and where those are coming from. Health food as a whole could certainly include supplements. It could include organic, right? That could be a part of it. There's also sort of what we would call, it's not really sort of a claim term, but the natural food, which is outside of organic. So there's natural and organic. Organic certainly has sort of the Organic Trade Association and very clearly defined that it has to meet all these requirements. There's another bucket of food which is in there as well, which is sort of the natural foods, right? And so they may be non-GMO, but they might just have certain things like we're gluten-free or we are kosher, or they might have claims, but they might not meet all the requirements of non-GMO, or they might not meet all the requirements of organic. So all of those types of foods can bucket, and some of them, even though they call them food supplements, perhaps could be thought of within that category. And that's why that number is so large, and maybe why organic, which is really expensive to grow and super, super important to the infrastructure of consumers. But that is why, organic is tricky from farming, and if we were just asking the question, is there enough farmland to operate organic as a segment? If it were to become as big as the entire health segment, no, we have a lot of issues, and there's so many things, so many hurdles, and organic requires soil to turn over certain ways, and there's just a lot of rules around that, and there's a clear need for that, there's no question. But there's other ways to make claims in perhaps a less strenuous way that still can meet most or many of the needs of those consumers who maybe don't want processed food or don't want mainstream food. So there's ways to get there that are less stringent, is maybe not the right way to think about it, but have fewer rules than organic per se. And so you'll see all of those buckets in the broader natural and organic industry. But to the farming specific question, yes, there's no question. If you look at, you take it back even a layer and you say, can the world produce enough crops and grains on farmland to feed the world? And that is a bad answer as well. And then you say for the growing need for health foods, and whether it's organic foods and grains that we want, or whether it's enough to meet even the natural requirements, right? There's not. We've done a lot to mainstream and combine and work for efficiency in farming and give them rebates, and that's important too, right? Because farming is really hard, and you're at the mercy of weather, and it's hard to not have a guaranteed income source. And so I would say, I'm not going to be the expert here, but I would say that there are many agricultural questions and concerns that we in the U.S. have to think through, and we always had the Organic Trade Association Day on the Hill. So we would go up every year to Capitol Hill, and we would talk with lawmakers, and we would explain to them how we saw different buckets growing and what we needed in terms of agriculture and policies and those sorts of things. But it's it's definitely a tricky topic. Is there a way to get there? There has to be a master plan. Is there a way to get there entirely organically? I would say no, but there are other buckets and there's other ways to work that. But in terms of needing more from farmland and more ability to produce food, that'll be a significant concern in the coming, I would say, years, but for sure decades going forward.
Well, I eat blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
I love them. And I've probably been doing that for a few years now, but I noticed a couple of things recently.
Mm-hmm.
Blueberries have gone way up in price, fresh ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Frozen ones are fine.
Mm-hmm.
There's two types. There's the wild,
mm-hmm.
and then there's the other. The wild are a lot more expensive. And I thought, I don't know which is better. How would I know? and then I looked at raspberries. I'm talking this week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all these things have gotten a lot more expensive.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm bringing this in to kind of talk about price a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, so the raspberries in the store, the ones that are labeled organic were almost, not exactly, but almost twice the price of the other raspberries.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I picked them up and I looked at them, and of course, I couldn't tell any difference. I'm sure there is.
Right.
But twice the difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the consumers today, right, there's some consumers that they don't care. They're going to pick organic no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
There's some that might want organic, but when they look at their whole basket, there's no way, right? Paying twice that. And then it's a small little container of raspberries.
Oh, there's no question.
So how do you think about those marketing variables, particular price,
for sure,
in
for sure.
equation?
Well, there's definitely, so you're absolutely right. There is a price premium or a cost premium, which drives the price premium on organic versus natural or non-GMO, and then certainly versus mainstream traditional. There's no question, and that's, as we talked about, there's more requirements for the food, for the soil and how you farm, and it's harder to do, and there's more costs involved in the labor and sort of the time that it takes to grow and get a field ready and all of those things. So those are real costs. So if you absolutely want organic, which frankly it's not the only way to think about it, but it's really pesticide free, right? And so if you want that choice, there is a cost to that choice, and we all know labor has been harder to get. Like in general, costs and logistics and transportation and all of those things have gone up in addition to the soil requirements that are happening on organic specifically. So things are definitely costing more. There's no question. There are buckets of food items, I would guess, as you talked about, in your basket. Are you going to make that choice for everything in your basket? And oftentimes what we would find when I was with Small Planet Foods or running Small Planet Foods is there are certain things that I'm not going to make a trade-off on. So I can wash a strawberry or wash a blackberry, but I can't necessarily guarantee that I have gotten pesticides off, right? So if I want to, anything that is literally going straight from the food in the ground into my system, in my body, I don't want to make any trade-offs, right? And you'll oftentimes find if I can peel a banana or peel an orange, at least there's a layer of protection. But for the types of foods, grapes and raspberries and blueberries and strawberries and those types of things, organic was a choice that they were not going to sway from, right? If there was something that was more processed, right? So center of the store. Is the organic important? Yes, it's important to me. Is it required when maybe I can't make ends meet or I can't afford everything in my basket? So that there would be a priority pecking order for my family and what's in my cart, starting with the skin on that's going directly into my body versus something that I might peel versus something that's in a box that has been processed in a different way that maybe I could just do non-GMO, or maybe I could just do the gluten-free option here. And we also found a different set of requirements if it was for my kids versus it's just something for me or for my spouse or my partner or whatever that might be. So consumers would definitely not make the trade-off, or were less likely to make the trade-off if it's for my kids, right? So, hey, my kids are young. I'm going to feed them Annie's mac and cheese. I'm going to get the organic one. If we're going to have mac and cheese, I might do Kraft for myself or for my partner. But for the young developing mind and bodies, those were harder trade-offs. So there's definitely a priority of where you would make those trade-offs. And then there's certain consumers, as you mentioned, that aren't going to make a trade-off for anything in their cart. And so I think that's a little bit of the beauty of understanding consumers, understanding what is driving their purchases, being incredibly respectful of their choices and the spending and the spending power that they've got versus what they need to sustain their individual life or their family's life, and how many kids they might have, and making sure that you have enough offerings. So you would see Annie's, as we bought Annie's and brought that into the General Mills portfolio, who was they were very clear as a brand to say, we always strive for organic, but there are going to be windows where we either can't get the supply that we need, and we might be made with organic as opposed to completely organic here, or we might be 90% organic in this version of mac and cheese, and we're going to be clear, we don't ever want to mislead you. but we're going to be clear in our journey to be entirely an organic portfolio at the time, of where we can't get there and where we have to make a trade-off, and it might help you with your value system or your purchasing power as you're thinking about what you're putting in your cart. And so all of those, they have continued to become more complex as you think about how expensive life is and inflation and the trade-offs that people have to make. But definitely there's a priority pecking order that perhaps has changed a little bit since I worked on Small Planet Foods, but that was very much where it was at the time.
Going back to your learning from founders of companies that you acquired at the big company, General Mills, I would think would translate well for you into private equity because, I think there, again, just like a big successful company might downplay the value of the founder of a small company they're acquiring, but you didn't. The same thing happens in private equity. And I would think that if you were a founder, you would want a private equity firm that would value your knowledge, not to say that you know everything. And, of course, one of the things New Road tries to do is to bring a network and expertise and these kind of things through operating partners like yourself. But really knowing that even though they may be struggling, there's still things they know that are quite valuable or they wouldn't be where they are.
Right.
Have you seen that play out in private equity as well?
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in the value of a founder. They had a burning passion and desire, and frankly, they were less risk averse than me, right? Because I was not an entrepreneur. I worked within the confines of a big corporate structure. And so entrepreneurs and founders have a great wrist for a vision and what they believe and that unmet need. And I want to create this product because I feel like it is missing and there are consumers who really want this, right? Whether it's Larabar from Lara American or whether it's Quinn Snacks from Christy Lewis, or there's so many options out there. And I think about what they bring to the table for the first 5 to 10 years of a business cannot be matched in terms of that founder vision. There are windows in every company as it grows, whether that benchmark, and it'll be different for every company, whether it's 20 million in sales or 30 million in sales or sometimes even earlier than that, where the skill set of a founder needs other people around them and occasionally needs a different type of management expertise. So whether that's brought in through operating partners or a CEO transition, where we still have a very clear role for the founder and we want them involved because we know their expertise and their opinion is critical. And I have seen a number of different options and different ways to make it work. So there's usually a window where you want to bring in an outside CEO, usually, right? That's going to vary. That's certainly my expertise comes from a consumer. There's other industries out there, but it is always in my mind important to have the founder and their vision and their insight a part of what is happening. And so even I would say at Larabar, Lara wanted to make the sale. It was the right window for them. They were $20 million in top line. General Mills, of course, came in. We rolled that into Small Planet Foods, but we made Lara the creative director, even though she really wasn't a part of the advertising agency at all, but we titled her the creative director. And she, for as long as I was at General Mills, and I still catch up with her every year at Expo West, she is still a part of the brand because she had the insight. She had the belief. Christy Lewis is very similar, right? She had the insight around Quinn Snacks. Quinn is her son, and that is who she created these initial products for, was I have kids now, and it is really meaningful and critical and important to me and my value system for my family to have I call them better mousetraps, right? Better than the main, most popular offering available, right? What is it that we can create that is better for you? And whatever the buttons are, whether it's gluten-free or it's non-GMO or it's organic or it's all of these things, what is that belief system behind that brand? They were the ones with the vision. And it gives them it gives the brand a level of authenticity and just a realness that you can't necessarily find in big CPG brands, right? And there's a place for all of them, right? There's a place for Totino's and there's a place for Larabar and there's a place for Quinn Snacks and Kevin's Natural Foods in the refrigerated section. There's a place for all of them because we have all of those consumers certainly and understanding and letting those brands grow to the best of your ability and to the best of their capability is what's critical and important to me. Sure.
Michele, you've had a very successful career, but if you could go right now, if you could all of a sudden appear before yourself at the beginning of your career.
Oh, that's a tricky one, yes.
What would you tell yourself?
I think there's probably a couple of things, right? The first one is don't take yourself so seriously. And I'll maybe elaborate on these, but don't take yourself so seriously. Don't worry so much. Maybe it goes back to, I think, the first question you asked me, which is trust the process, right? And then maybe the third bucket would just be your chapter 2, right? Sort of beyond the career that you envisioned is always evolving, right? Up until, in my mind, almost the day that you die, right? Your chapter 2 is evolving and there's all sorts of things to come at you. And so don't overthink. So if we go to the first one, don't take yourself so seriously. I remember coming out of business school and oh my goodness, you're like, this is what I have to contribute and I'm going to be the best and I'm going to work the hardest and just everything. And I'm like, Michele, I don't even know what I was when I started, a marketing assistant. Like, you're very lowly in this organization and don't take yourself so seriously, right? You come in with all these sort of grand ideas and all the things that you think that you can accomplish, and you can, right? There is a time and a place for all of them. But just maybe pausing a bit and listening. I remember how I sort of said it. It took me almost halfway through my career to recognize that the team is just as important as me. And our team is way better. We are way better when everyone is contributing as opposed to I have to do it all. And so I just think coming sort of straight out of undergrad to grad school and I'm going to hit the ground running, just don't take yourself so seriously and trust the folks around you. And that leads into number 2, which is just sort of let the process play out, right? And just give it time and recognize that there are windows for everything. Someone, trying to even remember where, might have actually been an article that I read early on, and it was a little bit more geared towards women and, the choices that maybe you have to make. If I'm going to have kids, am I still going to work, and all of those different things. And the concept from the article, which might have been from the Harvard Business Review, is just this concept of you can have it all. You just maybe can't have it at the same time. And I thought that was really, really good advice. Oh, I know. It was actually like the first 5 women who graduated from Harvard Business School who were interviewed at the end of their careers. And that was their advice sort of back to the new generation that was coming. And for me, that really landed for me, not until probably middle of my career, but this concept of like, boy, I am married, I have 2 kids, I have pets, I have aging parents, right? All of the things that we all have, right? Everyone has different competing priorities, and just sort of let the process play out. I do want it all, right? We all want it all. What all is maybe varies and changes as you get older, but we all have windows of I do want it all. But this concept of it just may not be at the same time, but you'll get there, right? You'll get it all. And again, all will change in terms of a definition. And so maybe that for sort of bucket number 2, I think was probably good advice for my younger self that I really, heard midway through my career, but didn't hear at the beginning. And then maybe the third bucket is there is a chapter 2, and that's going to evolve. And I think for me, what I've learned about myself in sort of this second window is I love to learn. And so I don't know, they sort of call that a bucket of I'm a learner, and I love new situations. And I don't know that I would have ever assumed that I would have been anything besides CPG and big companies. And I learned smaller companies and I learned founders, but that's what I was always within the General Mills bucket. And you can learn different things. You can evolve. You can learn different industries. You can pick up new skill sets. You can be a mentee, but you can be a mentor. And it's all of those things that evolve in chapter 2, right? And your value system might all stay the same, but that sort of you can have it all. The all changes, right? And so maybe those, in terms of pieces of advice, are the things that, whether they would have landed on me at age 24 when I started at General Mills, I don't know, right? So there's sort of a little bit of the give and take there as well, but I guess that would be the advice that I would give to my younger self.
Well, thank you so much. This has been terrific. I really appreciate you taking time to join me today and to share with the audience about this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. I enjoyed it and appreciate all the questions.
If you're finding value in this podcast, we greatly appreciate your support by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Additionally, following us on Apple and Spotify and leaving up to a 5-star review would be immensely helpful. We welcome any feedback or questions related to the podcast, as well as suggestions for further topics and guests. You can leave your comments on our YouTube channel, and rest assured that I will read each and every one of them. Please also take a moment to check out our podcast sponsors, as they play a critical role in keeping this podcast running. For more information on specific topics, timestamps, or links to articles mentioned during the podcast, head over to mattwallerpodcast.com.